it. This is the first episode of Live from the History Closet. So, welcome to my history closet. I have been wanting to do a live show on YouTube for years, and I just never had, the setup, like the permanent setup to be able to place myself and do a show. And now that I've moved and I have this history closet, I've been going live on TikTok a lot, and I'm like, you know what? I think I need to go back to my roots. I need to go back to YouTube. I need to dedicate myself to a weekly show from the history closet. So that's what I'm doing. This is the first one. Did I choose to do it on a Wednesday because of Wine Wednesday? Maybe because I did feel like, you know what? If I'm going back to YouTube, we got to go back to basics, which means I am bringing back the wine. I have my Cin Cin Creeps sign behind me, which I'm really excited about. I feel like after a decade of being on YouTube, I have come full freaking circle. We are here. We are going to talk all things history over the course of however long I do this show, hopefully every week for a very long time. And I figured, you know what? I've been doing a lot of short form content video a lot. And I've been doing kind of like this LA Victorian series. And so I've been doing that over on Instagram and on my reels and TikTok and stuff. And I just figured, you know what? I want to talk about some of these places on the first live because A, it's a subject I've been talking about a lot lately. And I love it. Like, I'm really, really passionate about LA history and architecture. Obviously, with my first show, Macabre Mondays, it was about historic locations that, of course, had, alleged haunted pasts and nefarious happenings within them. But LA, I feel like, compared to a lot of American cities, people have this notion that it doesn't have history. I mean, they know it has history, but they're usually pertaining to like Hollywood history, right? When in reality, this place is so culturally rich and so rooted in history. But there is this horrible epidemic of them tearing down so much of the historical architecture. So there's like a very niche group of people in this city that are very dedicated to telling the stories of the historic places that still exist and the ones that came before it. And it's interesting. So with my LA Victorian series, I've covered a lot of ground so far. I've done, houses from downtown by USC all the way out to Monrovia and, kind of everything in between. I get really jazzed about the stories of the people and, if the houses were saved, like why were they moved? How were they moved? All of those reasons. And I think when you start really paying attention to the architecture and the homes and the people that, lived in LA and made Los Angeles what it is, you just get this really incredible understanding of this amazing city. So I'm really excited to talk about a couple different homes with you guys today. But I figured, you know what? I feel like it's just important that we have not a moment of silence, but a moment of remembrance for all of the Victorians that didn't make it. So, with that, I'm going to say pour yourself a glass of whatever and let's toast to the Victorians that didn't make it. Chin chin. Did I contemplate using like Sarah McLachlan's Arms of the Angels for that video? Yes. Why? Let's ask each other. Why did I choose the Jurassic Park theme to put for that memorial video? And I don't have an intelligent reason except for the fact that the oil derricks that are all over Los Angeles and used to be truly all over Los Angeles remind me of dinosaurs. So I was just thinking about Bunker Hill because all of those homes that I just showed that unfortunately, RIP didn't make it, were on Bunker Hill, which if you're not familiar, if you don't live in Los Angeles or if you do and you don't know LA history or, neighborhoods, that's totally fine because Bunker Hill, although a portion of the hill still exists, it doesn't exist in the way that it used to. So Bunker Hill is in downtown Los Angeles. And it used to be, oh my god, it used to just be this incredible place full of the most incredible wooden Victorian homes you have ever seen in your entire life. And a really devastating thing kind of happens, whether it be from commercialization or infrastructure and all of that stuff, is they decided they needed to turn Bunker Hill into, a new commercial center in the 1950s. And you can't really blame them because although a lot of the homes were still there and being lived in, they certainly weren't being kept up. A lot of the people that lived in those homes would have fled in the early 1900s. We're talking the majority of them jump and ship in the 30s just because the bridges are going up, roads are happening, freeways are happening, there's more access to more parts of the city. And LA now is a sprawling suburbia, absolutely. But back in the day, it was like a sprawling farmland, and you were kind of stuck where you were. So when all of these things started happening and the bridges and the roads started happening, people had more access to be able to get to more areas of the city. And there was just better neighborhoods. Like people kind of saw it was happening in the downtown and more commercial buildings were coming in. And soon the 1% of LA isn't looking at being next to an industry, like they want to be in another neighborhood where all their other richie friends are. So you get a lot of this flight of people. Some of those people did, in fact, take their homes with them, which is something I focus on a lot in the show because most of or my series that I do, LA Victorians, because I think it's a weird concept to people nowadays, and it's a little bit weird to me too. But I think it's because we think of, you know, construction now in the way it's done now, which is not necessarily most of the time like high craftsmanship, right? Like, would your home that you just had built withstand a move across the city? Maybe, maybe not. But then you have to think about these houses withstood being moved by screw jacks, lifted onto a platform, and then pulled very slowly by oxen and horses. It was a crazy feat of ingenuity and truly endurance because people really wanted to keep their homes with them. And it might sound weird, but when you at that time it was just more about keeping what you had, just like when you look at things like clothes, right? Like now, god, I have an entire freaking closet full of clothes that I haven't worn in god knows how long. Back then you didn't, dude. You had three clothes. If I was a woman, I had saucy dress, I had funeral dress, and I had my day dress. Saucy dress, I don't know what the hell that is. I mean, going to my ball, going to a ball, going to a gala. This is my fancy dress. Then I have my everyday dress, and then I have oh, somebody died again. That's the dress I'm wearing. You have about three clothes. So if you're moving, maybe you don't want to buy a new house. Maybe you have a perfectly good house full of perfectly good furniture. You want to take it with you. So that's what you do. People, you move it with you, which I think is a really smart thing to do. It's a real I don't know if it's a way to save money. I've never actually looked at the cost of what it costs to move one of these houses. Probably still less money than building a new one and furnishing a new one and all of that jazz. So with that being said, I really want to talk about one of my personal favorite homes that didn't make it. Again, RIP, did not make the changing over, the industrialization, the commercialization of Bunker Hill. And that, my friends, is going to go ahead and be the Rose Mansion. The Rose Mansion, as you can tell, is just look at it. Look, I don't look at it, okay? I just want to hold it in my hands. It's perfect. It's beautiful. It's honestly like an acid trip. Like, you want turrets? Cool. Yeah, here's a turret, here's a turret, here's a bunch of different porches, here's a little alcove. It's just so there's so many cozy nooks on Victorian homes, and this one is like chef's kiss. It's incredible. It's incredible. But let's talk about this house because I chose it for a reason. And then when I get into the history, you guys are going to kind of know why. So the house was originally built for Leonard John Rose, who was originally from Bavaria, which is a very beautiful place. I just went. That's not pertaining to the story, but I did just go to Bavaria and it's freaking gorgeous. So why he left is beyond me, but either way, he came with his parents at an early age, around 12 years old. He settles in New Orleans, but he kind of gets all of his business ventures up in Iowa. By that time, he'd already kind of got an education over in Illinois. He's in Iowa. He's got a wife. He's got two kids at the time. And they're like, you know what? It's 1857. We're hearing things are going really cool out west, man. California is where it's at. So they decide to make the trek out to California, like a lot of people did. They made their way west, except somewhere around New Mexico, things don't go so well. They get their entire like party. Think of like a caravan. I'm picturing carriages, which is probably what it was because the Lewis and Clark expedition is always so much later in history than I expected it to be. So they're wagging it out. Okay, here they are, just wagging it out, and a Native American raid happens. A bunch of people freaking die. The Rose family, Leonard, his wife, his two kids, super sad, man. They're like sad. They just watch their friends get murdered. So they just settle in New Mexico for a little while, probably just trying to like compose themselves, right? Because that's a lot. That's a lot to see. But by 1860, they finally make it to California, but they end up settling originally in the San Gabriel Valley. Now, this is important because they end up buying, a large chunk of farmland and they start growing vineyards and citrus, which is like, if you're talking about Southern California, okay, those are like, you're going to make some money. You're going to make some good money. And oh my God, they do. All their grapevines are from like Spain and Italy and France. So they're bringing top notch wine to the Southern California region. They also got their fruits going. It's a really good business. I got to be honest. They're doing really well. And then Leonard's like, you know what I should also get into? Let's do like horse breeding. Let's do like a horse ranch situation. And he does have a horse ranch and it's called Rosemead, which is what the city of Rosemead is named after because that is where they were living. But at this point, okay, they got like, oh my God, they got so much money, man. Like they're doing so well financially. And like I said, you start getting infrastructure. There's more roads going in. So maybe they don't want to be out east anymore. They're out in the boonies. They're here and there's a really hopping new neighborhood and it's called Bunker Hill. And they want to go move to where the other Richie Riches are. So in 1888, they spend, now just like take a second and process what I'm about to tell you. They spend $50,000 in 1888 monies. I don't even want to know how many millions that is. So many millions. It'd be so many millions nowadays. They spent $50,000 to build this palatial home, okay? And it's kind of pissing people off, to be honest, because there's so much lumber that they need to build this freaking palace that it's just in the road. Workers can't work 24/7. So when they're not working, they're just sitting there. People are freaking sick of it. So they're complaining, people writing the papers like, oh, who's this asshole, Mr. Rose, who's doing all of this stuff. It's not great. But when the house is completed, people are changing their tune, man. They're like, holy crap, have you seen this place? Have you seen this place? Have you seen this place? There's an entire article just on the stained glass windows of the house, which apparently were designed by Leonard's son. Oh yeah, I meant to mention, at this point, when they're living in this new fancy palace house, they have 9 children. So yeah, okay, they're living in the affluent, happy, happening place to be in Los Angeles. Everybody who's a who's looking over at their palace being like, damn, roses. But they also have 9 children. So you have to really ask yourself, like, how happy are they? You know what I mean? I need to sit for that. That's a lot of work. So things are going to take a turn here, okay? It's now been 11 years. They're living life to the fullest. Mr. Rose, again, it's 1899 at this point. Men are completely in charge of the money. He's not investing it well. He's actually investing it very poorly. And by 1899, they are so in debt. They are so in debt that even if they sold all of their assets, they sold the house, the clothes off their back, everything they've ever owned, they would still be in the freaking hole. So now the question you have to ask yourself, did he tell his wife this? No. No, he did not tell his wife this. She finds out from his suicide letter. Okay, so am I getting heated about this? Yeah, because I think it's a cowardly way out. Okay, because here he is spending all their money, making bad investments, and instead of just communicating with his wife, he decides to off himself. Okay, so she finds out about their financial circumstances by getting a letter delivered to her at the house. It basically says, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. We're so in debt. There was no other way. I had to take my own life. And then the pièce de résistance, he said, you will find my body in the backyard. Taking a sip. I'm taking a sip for that. She's freaking distraught. Can you imagine? Probably just chilling on a normal day, sitting there in your freaking corset, can't breathe, right? But you're like just trying to be polite. But you're having some tea, thinking things are fine. I'm living in this freaking palace, and all of a sudden, no, 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 I'm sorry. Mrs. Rose, here's a letter for you. And it's from your husband who has just told you that your entire financial situation is screwed. So much so that he's just offed himself and his body, his corpse, supposedly in the backyard. So she's not going to go gallivanting in her corset and little mini shoes into their backyard to find the freaking corpse. No, of course not. That's not what she's doing. Okay. So she calls up, probably not. She sends a messenger to get her son in law, who's at work at the time. And she's like, you got to get over here because apparently my husband, Leonard, apparently offed himself, but he's somewhere on the property. So he goes back there. Does he find him? Yeah. 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 He does find him. Okay. But check this out. The dude's basically planned a funeral for himself. He's laying there. He's looking real nice. He's got a top hat on. His head's on it. Okay. The most shocking part about this entire like visual to me is he's grasping a bouquet of carnations. I'm sorry. Is he already in a casket? Like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. So they rush him to the hospital because the dude, check it out, the dude's not dead yet. They pump his stomach. He had ingested 67 pills of morphine pills, whatever, pills of morphine. But at that point, it was too late. Okay, the damage had been done by the morphine, and he died at the hospital. And the entire family and his wife, penniless, penniless, done, donezo. She's lost her. Here's the thing. This is why I think it's cowardly, and I'm going to go on a tangent for a second. This is why I think it's cowardly because she's going to be penniless regardless. Her kids, regardless, are screwed. So even if he was trying to do some kind of like insurance thing, some life insurance policy, you sent her a suicide letter. You don't get insurance money if you commit suicide. So it's just this, he was just a coward. He didn't want to live poor. He didn't want to own up to his mistakes. So he's letting his wife just deal with the consequences in his family. And I think it's messed up. I think it's really messed up. He's buried at Evergreen Cemetery. I have a plan to go visit his grave and just like not be disrespectful, but I just think I need to voice my grievances because it really does bother me that he just thinks that was totally fine. And I don't think it was fine. So at the turn of the century, like from somewhere between the turn of the century, because this was in 1899, all the way to the 1930s, the house changes hands like a bunch of different freaking times until eventually it lands in the hands of Mary Hotchkiss, who moves there with her first husband. And this is kind of an interesting little tidbit because she is one of the first women in LA that owns multiple real estate properties. So she's kind of boss lady, and I'm kind of into it. Her first husband croaks in the house. When she gets with her second husband, at this point she already owns multiple properties. The entire neighborhood is kind of going downhill. It's the 1930s. So she's like, you know what? Hey, this is to her second husband. Let's go live in my hotel. So they went and lived in her hotel. And at that point, the house just kind of sat super empty and decrepit until it was raised in the 1950s when the whole like new commercialization and new plan for Bunker Hill happened. So, it's a really sad moment in my opinion in architectural history because that house was so special. I don't know, a lot of the times when these homes were raised, they would have auctions and they would actually auction off pieces of the home. I know some historians in LA that are particularly like very, very knowledgeable on specifically like Bunker Hill homes. I know some of them have been able to collect different like ephemera and stuff from these houses. This was way before my time. I do not have any of those, unfortunately. But it's just, man, like talk about like what a bummer. It would have been so I just try to imagine what it would have been like back in the day to see these homes and that house specifically, and I think this was a really interesting story to tell because obviously it's got a little bit of like a little spicy macabre story attached to it. But also I just think it's a really good how do I explain it? I think it kind of encapsulates the entire area, like the rise and the fall of that area in like a one particular familial situation because you have these people that come here with nothing, end up making so much money, move there during the height of its like affluence. Like everybody was living there. I mean, you had people living out in Pasadena too, but it's like you had the rich people in Pasadena, then you had all the rich people down in Bunker Hill. It's kind of like the two hubs at this point in history and they were there for it and then they lost all of it and kind of a lot of the story that you hear repeated with the different homes of Bunker Hill. So I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I really enjoyed it a lot. I just love that home and I'm really devastated. But on a more positive note, the next house I want to share with you guys is a house that still exists and it's just a little spicy. So we are going to talk about the Hale House. Okay, so the Hale House is a really interesting house because it's kind of saucy. It's saucy in a way that differs from the sauciness of the Rose House. So the Hale House was originally built in 1887 for like a land prospector and real estate dude called George Morgan, who didn't have the house honestly for all of that. Well, I mean, maybe he did. It changed hands though quite a few times until it finally landed in the hands of the Hales in 1906. And they're kind of the stars of this story. And it's obviously who the house is named for. So James G. Hale was a motorman, but he was also the owner of multiple not so gentlemanly establishments downtown. Uh, and I just think it's just hilarious. I don't know why I think it's so funny. I think it's because this house is so famous and it's so beautiful. And I just love that the person that it's named for was crooked as all hell. But it gets better. The first time I actually found anything in newspapers about James Hale was a little blurb where he had landed in the drunk tank for being super intoxicated and assaulting and taking on, like, starting an argument with a very like reputable and respected cigar shop owner. And like that's his first blurb in the papers is by like being in the drunk tank, which is just hilarious to me. And he would marry I love her so much. He would marry Bessie Hale, who he met when she was still waitressing at the Pico House. Now, I just threw in a tangent really quick because if we're talking about LA significance, like LA historical significance, the fact that this couple that is synonymous with one of like the most famous Victorian homes in Los Angeles met at one of the most significant LA establishments ever. Like the Pico House used to be the grandest hotel in all of Southern California. And it's got a really crazy history. I mean, it was built for and named for Pio Pico, who was like the last governor of Mexican ruled California, who had a lot of money. Then he kind of like lost a lot of that money gambling and doing different types of stuff. And so the fact that they met there is just like, I don't know. And it also, here's the thing though, it makes sense because he has a little bit nefarious dealings. He has some sketchy businesses, and we're right in downtown LA. This is right at LA Plaza, right? So you're on the border of Chinatown, and the red light district was not far from this. So it makes sense that, he would be like, I don't know, I'm doing this. I'm just Jack Sparrowing my way into the Pico House because I just assumed he was drunk as all hell. I don't know. I don't know, guys. It is what it is. Also, just a total random fact. Nothing to do with the story, but I did have my first kiss with my now husband in front of the Pico House. Does that make me biased for this? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe a little bit. Anyways, so, so. We have James and we have Bessie. Both of them are actually in sketch businesses. Okay. What do I mean by that? We know James is doing God knows what. Okay. But Bessie, ooh, Bessie, my friends, is very likely to have been a madam. Why do I think this? Why do I know this? Well, we know that Bessie owned a couple different boarding houses, which you could think, oh yeah, she's making some money. People are coming in, the trains are rolling on in, they need places to stay. Well, just wait. In 1916, she attempted to pay somebody off when the Abatement Act was happening. Basically, what was happening was the red light district of prostitution in 1916 was so bad and so rampant in LA that they needed to pass an act that like shut it down. And just riddle me this. If her boarding houses weren't brothels, why would she need to pay somebody off to look the other way during an inspection when this whole act happened? You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? So we have James, we got Bessie, and they're just, they're doing their thing. And what's interesting about this this whole situation is we don't even know about her paying somebody off in 1916 until 1918. Because what happens in 1918? Well, Bessie and James's marriage was horrible. We could be nice and say it's complicated, but the reality is it was just really, really bad. It was not good at all. In fact, in 1918, she files for divorce, claiming cruelty. Also, it comes out. This is the craziest thing. So I have researched LA a lot. I have never seen a divorce trial, court proceedings, whatever, like publicized the way that theirs were. I mean, it was everywhere. And it was really because it was this crazy sensational case, and neither one of them would agree on freaking anything. So it comes out, all the things that come out in their divorce proceedings is like she's paid somebody off in 1916. Also, they're like really rich, like really, really wealthy. Like they have like $15,000 worth of diamonds in the house. This is what? This is in 1918. Again, I don't know. I don't know how much that would cost nowadays. It's a lot of freaking money. Okay. $15,000 worth of just diamonds is insane. She's got furs out the wazoo. They just have everything and everything. And then it comes out that one of the other reasons why she is filing for divorce is because not only does he have a mistress, he staged a fake robbery claiming that they'd been robbed of some of her jewels and her furs that went missing, when in reality, he had just given them away to his mistress. That's crazy. That's a crazy, crazy, crazy story to me. Like, it's so good. To me, it's a really good story. But unfortunately, the judge didn't think it was that great of a story, and he didn't believe Bessie. So he did not grant them a divorce, which the idea that somebody has to grant you a divorce to me is crazy. Like, if you're done, you should be done. You shouldn't have to explain it to anybody, but I get it's a legal binding contract, whatever, whatever. Anyways, they were denied a divorce. Doesn't mean they stayed together. From 1918 until James's death in 1921, they were separated. But then the dude croaks. So did she get the house? Well, there was a pretty intense will debate, but ultimately she was able to get the house. And guess what? She ran a boarding house out of it. It's just a story that just keeps on giving, right? And then so she lives out the rest of her life in the house until her niece ends up donating the house to Heritage Square Museum in the 1970s. And so that is the history of the Hale House. What I love about the history of the Hale House is it kind of shines a light on a huge portion of Los Angeles's history that I don't think it's talked about enough. I'm biased because I love the kind of like bootlegging prostitution era of American history. But LA had a great one. Like, some people don't know that Capone was here. Like, we had so many great mobsters. We had so many great speakeasies. It was just a great time. It was a great time in American. No, okay, maybe it wasn't a great time. Historically, though, it was very fun to research and learn about. And I do think it's incredible, and I'm so grateful that the Hale House ended up at the Heritage Square Museum. Now, if you don't know what the Heritage Square Museum is, whether you've been in LA, never been to LA, or you just don't know what it is, It is this perfect little alcove of Victorian homes that have been saved, that are just kind of sequestered, like literally at the end of the most random neighborhood street, right off of the 110 freeway. If you're driving the 110 freeway, you look over, you'll miss it if you don't catch it right away. But there's about, what is it, eight? Maybe there's more. I think there's at least eight homes there, and the entire point of it is to save these Victorian homes, to give them a place to be. Because even though we talked about Bunker Hill earlier, none of the homes at Heritage Square were ever on Bunker Hill. They come from places like Lincoln Heights, Boyle Heights, Highland Park, which is where actually the Hale House was from, like around Highland Park, and Pasadena. And it's so funny to me because I think a lot of people just think when they think of historic homes in LA, they just immediately say Bunker Hill. There's been a lot of hills. We've had a Pound Cake Hill. We had a Queen Hill. There's all different types of hills that had different types of houses on them. Okay. In a bunch of different neighborhoods, whether it's through, here's the thing. LA, I think this is the one thing that I really hope to educate people on, and I hope people research more on their own time, is LA is just like a parfait of history. Every place is sitting atop another place in history, and obviously that's true with anywhere you go in the world. But like for example, Union Station sits atop the former Chinatown. In Chinatown sat atop an ancient Tongva village. So you just have all of these layers of different historical times in LA. And what's frustrating about it is, unlike other cities, like, everywhere essentially on the East Coast, the West Coast does not do as good of a job at preserving our history as other places, which is very frustrating. And I think LA is 100% one of those places that, unless you go to the LA Plaza, down on Alvera Street, that little corridor, like that little spot, that's about it. And then we have places like Carroll Avenue that have a bunch of historic homes, most of which were there. They're in their original location, which is incredible. But then you have places like Pasadena, where there we do have a good amount of historic homes here. A lot of them are craftsmen, which is incredible, like Green and Green, like the Gamble House, Castle Green. We have so many beautiful homes here, and a handful of them are Victorian. But we had a Millionaires Row back in the day, which is Orange Grove Avenue. That was where the Wrigley Mansion is, which is now the Tournament of Roses house. But back in the day, that would have been just like so many beautiful historic mansions, and so many of them are gone. Whether it's, LA's history has just seen an epidemic of wiping the slate clean when it comes to our historic architecture, whether it's from, colonization, commercialization, industry, infrastructure. West Adams neighborhood is another incredible location. So many amazing homes out there, not necessarily Victorian, but a lot of really beautiful, like 20s, 30s architecture. That was where like the affluent like Black community was, until they decided to build the 10 freeway, kind of cut it in half. And interestingly enough, like even to this day, parts of the city, part of the city's histories is still being threatened. Like again, here in Pasadena, if you go up Pasadena Avenue up towards the 210 and the 134, half of those homes, these beautiful historic craftsman homes, are sitting empty because they were taken in eminent domain because they thought they were going to expand the freeway. One of those homes is Julia Child's former like childhood home. This is incredible history that's just sitting there empty. No one's living in it. No one's doing anything with it because the city just hasn't decided what they want to do with it yet. So it's heartbreaking. So Heritage Square, although it doesn't contain any of the homes from Bunker Hill, it does contain homes from other places around the city that have seen the same kind of tragedy that Bunker Hill did have. But the two homes that were first purchased or donated, I guess is a better term, to the Heritage Square Museum were actually two homes. This hurts me to say, two homes from Bunker Hill. It was the castle and it was the salt box house. And in my in memoriam, in the beginning of this little live, I showed you guys a couple pictures of the salt box and the castle when they were on the platform, sitting, waiting. And then another photo of them burning, because they were burnt to the ground in 1969. Some people like to theorize that it was a couple Manson family rejects that burnt the houses down. But basically, while they were waiting to be moved to the site of the museum, people were just like partying in them and eventually they got burned down. So, Heritage Square Museum originally would have contained two homes from Bunker Hill. So it's just, it's a sad story, but there's so much beautiful architecture in and around LA. I'm obviously very passionate about it. I love it very, very much. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know in the comments if there's other homes that you guys would like me to feature. I absolutely will. I'm pretty sure a lot of these lives are going to be me talking about LA history just because I'm here. I have access to it and I love it. And I just don't think people pay as much attention to it as they do other cities like New Orleans, Savannah, Salem, all these cities, San Francisco. Incredible histories. I love these histories. I love them so much, but it's just not necessarily, it's not it's not LA. I do love it here. I really do love it here. So if you guys are interested in more LA history or if you have specific places that you would like me to feature, I absolutely will. As these go on, I just plan the whole point of these to me is just to be able to sit and chat with you guys about history in real time. I'm so passionate about it. I love it so much. And there's so many things that I am really intrigued by. I think, with Macabre Mondays and all my different shows, Grave Hunter, it's like it's very specifically pointed, like I've niched myself, right? Like I'm talking about haunted locations or cemeteries and all of those things are amazing. History rants. This is, you know what this is? This is a live version of history rants, which I'm happy with because I can talk about whatever the hell I want. You guys can ask me whatever the hell you want, which I just love. Like that, it's exciting to me. Ooh, can I look into some Idaho history homes? Yes. If there's a city or town in Idaho in particular, that would help. Also, like this is so random, but like I do research, like I do research for people for hire just because I'm a researcher. That is what I do. It's what I love to do. Um, oh God, I get so jazzed, guys. So thank you for watching, everybody that's watched. I'm gonna be uploading these to the channel, so they'll live there forever and ever. But until next week, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it so, 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 so much. And I'll see you guys next week. Cin Cin Creeps.